Okay.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you, Renee.
Can you see me? Excellent.
Yes,
Thanks.
perfect.
Great.
Fantastic.
Have a good afternoon. We can start with our conference. Thank you very much.
Okay. Welcome to all to this conference inside the GeoNight 2024. The conference is about artificial intelligence from a perspective of geography, future challenges. And we are organizing this conference from the side of Erasmus Mundus program Climate Change and Diversity, the Climate Justice Monnet Center of Excellence, the Laboratory of Drone for Good. In our group of research, teaching, and activities with citizens, we do many activities of extreme citizen science. And for us, it's very important to work for a democratization and a social ownership of technology. A couple of years ago, we published a book on agroecology and technological sovereignty. And in the last 10 years, we are involved in Amazon rainforest of Ecuador with indigenous people and farmers and peasants to work for climate and environmental justice. We think that geography can supply interesting tool for democratization and sharing of knowledge in a perspective of geovisualization of the challenge of climate justice. Today we have 3 speakers. We start with Ayona Datta. She is Professor of Human Geography at University College of London. She will present us a speech about the future of postcolonial urbanism from smart cities to automated urbanization. Ayona is a feminist geographer focusing on postcolonial urbanism, digital geography, and a regional future. She focused on investigation in the ethos of co-production with grassroots communities using digital mapping, visual, and participatory research methods. She is coordinating research of RC on regional future to advance on theoretical and empirical insight in the relation between digitalization and urbanization, especially in the Global South. She has been editor of Urban Geography, etc. But I want just to cite some paper she prepared. One of 2018 is about the digital turn in post-colonial urbanism. Another paper of 2015 is about new urban utopias of post-colonial India. And I think very challenging the work of 2019 about smart cities and the banality of power. I think the reflection of on digitalization, smart cities, power, exclusion, and etc., and the role of a grassroots movement is very interesting. So we are proud to have Ayona here, and we let the floor to her to share this presentation. Thanks, Ayona, to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm really excited to be here. I'm going to try and share now. But probably you'll have to tell me what you see, because what I see from my side is different. Okay, do you see my slide?
Yes, everything okay?
Thank you.
You see my first slide. Fantastic. So thank you for such a generous introduction. I want to talk about the future of postcolonial urbanism as I see it, of course, from my work so far on smart cities, and now moving on to thinking about digitalization and its impact on wider regional futures. So I want to start with saying that I want to talk about where I see both my work going, and perhaps that's kind of an extension of where I see the future of postcolonial urbanism going. And I say this with complete humility, and of course, other people might think very differently. So it's based on the context in which I've done a lot of my past research, which is in India, but now also more recently in South Africa, Kenya, and Mexico. And the argument I want to really present is that, of course, post-colonial urbanism, and there's been, you've cited some of my work already, and what I've seen in the past with a kind of shift towards a technocratically driven mode of urban governance that has relied extensively on smart cities initiatives and smart cities policies to deliver this mode of urban governance, I think now is widening and becoming broader to encompass a larger vision of digitalization as urbanization, so to speak. And I hope in this very quick talk, I will give you some thoughts that I have been having while doing my own research project. And as I said, this is based on more current research, which is funded by an ERC advanced grant. So I want to start with saying, do you see the slide moving at all? I hope it is. So I want to start with saying earlier my work was, of course, on smart cities and digital technologies. And what I have suggested is that there is, of course, we see a digital turn towards city making, city governance, and so on. And even sort of grassroots and bottom-up initiatives to change the city has relied on smart technologies. But I've also said that initiatives to adopt these smart technologies often start with this claim that opportunities that are presented by digitalization will resolve a lot of challenges of urbanization. And often some of these challenges of urbanization are social challenges, which have always become very technocentrically or technocratically sort of approached. A large part of the smart cities literature and initiatives, both in the Global South that I've been working on, have often presented an infrastructural problem. So it's about transport, or it's about mobility, or it's about water systems, or sewage systems, or waste, and so on and so forth, and including a smart fix or a digital fix to address this infrastructural problem has been somewhat the broader characteristic of smart cities in the Global South that I have looked at. And often this technocratically driven solution to the infrastructural problem is seen to bypass the problem of discretion. And I use discretion very broadly. It can range from anything from corruption to lack of knowledge and lack of skills. So often these technocratically driven solutions are used as both regional, state, and national governments to say, well, we have a problem here, which is infrastructural, social, and technology, as in smart technology, can address this. And so this sort of initiative, and my early research on this was the Indian 100 Smart Cities program that wanted to retrofit 100 existing smart cities with smart technologies and make them kind of fit for the future. And I kind of suggested that these encounters with digital and information technologies have actually transformed municipal governance, and especially governance of cities that earlier were not kind of seen as fit for the future. And often these sort of, in fact, even the smaller cities that adapted these technologies to become smart cities of the future, these smaller cities were not really prepared for these smart technologies, because smart technologies, of course, require a very strong infrastructural base to then retrofit or graft onto them. So in these smaller cities, they came on the back of very kind of accumulative histories of information revolution in the Global South, but also accumulative histories of sort of information lack, data scarcity, infrastructural discontinuities. And so it kind of fixed itself in like a patchwork or a fragmented approach towards these so-called smart cities for the future. And so then from there, when I have been doing further research in other parts of the Global South, I began to think that it is not just smart cities that we need to be looking at when we're thinking about digital technologies, or now, of course, platformization and automation in the future. What we are seeing is an expansion of this mode of digitalization. And I'm saying this very much from a state's perspective. Of course, I'm not speaking now from bottom-up perspectives, which can be a very different story. But looking at it from a top-down vision of what digitalization can do for state governance or urban governance, I see digitalization and urbanization very much two sides of the same coin, so to speak. So I call this digitalization as urbanization, because what's happening now is the rapid urbanization that we see unfolding are in the metropolitan peripheries. But these metropolitan peripheries are not subject to the smart city initiatives, the earlier smart city initiatives. And these metropolitan peripheries are often, they're filled with informal settlements, irregular housing, unplanned development, and so on and so forth. So they have a big burden and a legacy of paper bureaucracies and paper infrastructure, paper information infrastructures. And digitalization have reached them in a very different way, and not in the same way as you would expect with smart technologies. So the digitalization is urbanization kind of argument is that on the one hand, we see rapid urbanization in the metropolitan peripheries, and digitalization is trying to catch up with this urbanization because the state realizes, oh, we need to monitor these peripheries. We need to see what is going on so that we are better able to manage and govern this transition to a more planned future. On the other hand, digitalization is increasing all sorts of possibilities for seeing urbanization. So as digitalization is moving forward and you have different new technologies of aerial photography, satellite mapping, LiDAR systems, and all sorts of things, and there is that imperative then that we can use these technologies to map urbanization. So digitalization is driving urbanization, but also urbanization is driving digitalization. And this is kind of two-part process that's happening in the metropolitan peripheries. And this is impacted by three different aspects of it, which, as I said, that these three different circles that show. The first is this flowing from paper to digital, the information flowing from paper to digital, where in these geographies of the peripheries are driven by paper bureaucracies, paper-based ways of seeing the region, the territory. And that leads to the second circle, which says digitization and digitalization. And so the first step is digitization, that is the transfer of this information from paper to a digital format. And digitalization then is taking that format, uploading it, and transforming it into a more platformized, automated information infrastructure that requires a complete system change in the bureaucracy. And that requires a huge amount of archival and survey labor from the state and state officials. And that's where we've been talking a lot with state government officials to see the amount of labor they have to put in to enable this digitization to happen first, and then verify, validate, and then enable the platformization to happen is very, very time and resource intensive. And then the third aspect then is what that leads to in terms of territorial politics, contestations, because there's always a conflict between paper and digital. What the information that is there on paper doesn't always match or cannot always match to what's on digital formats. And that leads to the transformation then of regions, particular parts of the regions, which are often in the peripheries, into also informational peripheries, because they remain absent from some of the digital mapping systems, some of the kind of automated urbanization platforms. And hopefully, as I go forward, it'll become clearer as I explain this. So first, as I said, the disjunct or even the attempt of the state to smoothly flow paper into digital, which means often the state, in terms of the future, projects itself as having to really govern a smooth transition from a paper information infrastructure to a digital information infrastructure, because that is the only possibility for an automated future. But what we often see is that there's often a conflict between paper information and born digital data. And this requires a huge amount of effort and resource and time from local authorities, from local municipalities that are often lacking in the sort of resources, skills, or experience to transfer all these the rooms and buildings filled with ledgers of files, paper files and documents into digitized formats. So as I said, the archival labors, the labor in first archiving, cataloging, synthesizing, standardizing in terms of even creating a format that can be digitized and put on the information database is huge. And so the archival labors of these officials and state departments is very fraught, because they're always working with the bureaucratic mechanisms of paper that existed before, while slowly and laboriously transferring paper into digitized formats. And then civil servants, then they have to grapple with the demands of these new apps that are introduced while maintaining the flow of communications as well across state spaces. And then, of course, the pace of paper information as it is being collected vis-a-vis the pace of digital data, the tempos of the territorial information capture through satellites and drones, etc., to what is actually what we see in the everyday life of the metropolitan peripheries, reveal multiple asynchronicities of digitalization and urbanization and where they drive each other. So I would say what we are seeing now is also a sort of a temporal turn in this automated future or aspired to automated future of urbanization. And this is just an example that came out from some of our work in Kenya. This is the sort of survey labor that you see that civil servants and state officials have to engage in even after satellite mapping and digitization of the paper maps. Because this is a survey of Kenya, which has maps dating from the early 20th century. It's been very important to digitize because they need to be the background, the basis on which an aerial photography is overlaid. And so even after digitization, however, the survey officials have to carry out extensive verification and validation exercises to bring these maps up to date and to geospatialize each parcel of land across these different geographies, and then to issue land titles, because then these land titles enter into the digital informational economy, but also the tax economy. And so verification, however, is a very tedious exercise in which owners are then expected to be standing on their plots with their documents, and the officials then mark coordinates on the plot, verify against records, validate the parcel. But then this validation becomes fraught because sometimes you have 2 or 3 owners of the same plot. So it's not easy, it's very complex. And then on top of that, the paper maps that existed before, they used different map projection systems because obviously the surface of the earth is round, and so the map projection systems have to be different. There's difference between the map units because it moved from imperial system to metric systems. And so all sorts of complications arise, which make it not accurate. And that sort of contradicts the state vision and the aspirations of the state to have everything geospatialized and everything absolutely accurate. And what we're told again and again by the state officials is even after digitalization, we cannot be sure that any of this information that's there on the National Information Database is absolutely accurate when you actually reach the ground. And for that reason, the paper maps, the paper documents acquire increasing value because the digital data is not accurate or cannot be trusted always. The paper documents become the only authentic record of territorial changes or geographic changes and kind of changes in urbanization, because paper you can make out which paper is authentic and which one is fake. They have different ways of making out authenticity, whereas digital data, if it's been manipulated on GIS or on aerial photography, is for them harder to validate and establish authenticity. And then when it goes on to the platformization and automation, here we have one of the platforms that has been initiated in one of the peripheral counties of Nairobi. It's Kajiado County. There's a new system called KDAMS that's been installed recently in order to automate this vision for the future, where everything, all sort of applications, all decisions can be taken and seen and transparent and circulated via this digital platform. And also, of course, the whole argument is that it's going to make things transparent and eliminate errors and discretion at kind of the official level. But for the officials in the department, it's been extremely difficult to use, and it's been a very long process to smoothen out the glitches and begin to troubleshoot the system. And at the very basis of this, at the very beginning of when this was installed, this information system, they were asked to use in a building, in the department building, which was actually not connected to the fiber optic cable. So the officials actually had to use low-cost technologies like Tether from their mobile phones in order to access this information database and try and see what's going on in terms of the planning applications and the changes in land use and urbanization and so on. And Kajiado County is one of the most rapidly and the fastest growing counties in the peripheries of Nairobi. And so it suggests that what is going on here is that the information that is coming into this platform and automation gets outdated very quickly, notwithstanding, of course, the difficulties often in accessing this information because of lack of digital infrastructure in these peripheral counties. And so one of the state officials said to us that they're always trying to catch up with urbanization. So urbanization is always one step ahead. What's happening on ground is always one step ahead. And platformization and automation, contrary to the claims and aspirations and the visions of the future, that's from where you can manage everything, is actually trying to just catch up. And it's actually one extra layer of bureaucracy over and above the paper bureaucracy that they have to now manage and control and mediate. So here, it's not just catching up for them with urbanization, it's also trying to maintain some kind of information and knowledge about unauthorized construction, multiple ownership claims, illegal subdivisions, which was possible before when it was a paper-based system and they would go on site and make visitations. But here they're supposed to manage everything through this automated database, and the information flows are not as smooth as they would like it to be. So this is a very kind of really quick and broad overview of how things are unfolding in terms of this future aspiration for a post-colonial urban future of automated decision-making that is happening through digital methods. And everyone's kind of tuned in, smooth, seamless flows across state departments, across different scales. And that's not quite how we see it happening. The future of post-colonial urbanism, therefore, it's not just an extension of the technocratic state, which is what I used to think when I was looking at smart cities, that the technology and the technocratic solutionism has infiltrated into urban governance. But I think now that it's not just that, it's more than that. It's a fundamental reorganization of state bureaucracies, information flows, and territories that are built on the backbone of paper and labor. And that's the most complicated thing to do, because it was built on a very different system. And yet that system is supposed to be flowing seamlessly into the digital system, which is a very different kind of system. And of course, notwithstanding the lack of resource, lack of capacity, lack of skills and experience these officials have in making that possible. So what I want to suggest is, for kind of research agenda to see the future of post-colonial urbanism, we need to see digitalization through the mechanisms of paper and labor, but especially through the embodied labor that would enable us to understand how paper is material information and how paper continues to circulate and actually become even more salient and authenticated and more significant, and almost like a historical fact, which can verify but even supersede contested information that you see online on the digital information bases that is supposed to be automated in real life and real time. And so what this means is that the storage and securitization of paper has increased multiple fold in these smaller municipalities, because paper is supposed to be almost the lifeline of any kind of claims to ownership or territorial politics in which multiple owners come forward, or they're taking up indigenous land and indigenous communities come and contest, which is, of course, has very differential impacts across communities, which I haven't had the time to talk about. So you see often with indigenous communities, as urbanization is approaching them, they lose their land, because the mapping of this land is based also on legal systems of land ownership. And often indigenous communities don't have access to legal property titles. So the potential for reinforcing territorial politics or contested territorial politics becomes even more possible in this sort of case, where the digital system is built on a legal economy. And so I just wanted to maybe propose something counterintuitive, in that automation, despite all the seamless narrative, is actually the way it rolls out. The actually existing automation in the way it rolls out on ground, particularly in sort of regional context, is very fragmented. Automation is fragmented, it's conflicting, it's often disrupted because of lack of infrastructure or lack of skills and so on, or even lack of buy-in by state officials, and therefore discontinuous across different state spaces and state scales. And that discontinuity disrupts information flows, which is key to the process of automation. And so what I want to suggest is increasing automation actually often increases reliance upon more conventional, more low-tech information infrastructures. And paper here, again, is not just one of them. I haven't had the chance to talk about other low-tech information infrastructures like WhatsApp, like PDF documents, like USB sticks, and cases in which you can't access this sort of automated information databases, WhatsApp and USB sticks become the common ways of information flows to bypass this disruptive nature or fragmented nature of automation. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Many thanks, Ayona, for your very interesting presentation and this relation between post-colonial urbanism and the technology. I don't know if there is a question in the in YouTube, etc. We can share with you, and especially because we know you should leave, and so eventually we give us a short space for eventually if we have a question about this your presentation. And I think it's very important your contribution in highlighting how inside digitalization there is a lot of embodied work. This don't appear, but the majority of data need a lot of processing, not only to prepare the data, also for the use of data, etc. And all the data are local. Is very interesting, this book, but also it is the production of human works. And so I think this is very, very important contribution for your presentation. Okay, if we have not question at this moment, we thanks to Ayona to be here, and we stay in contact. And we move, I don't know if you want to say some things.
I just wanted to say I can stay for another half an hour, so if people are digesting it and want to come back. But yeah,
Okay.
I would need to leave in about 20, 25 minutes.
Can stay more here. Eventually, at the end of the second presentation, if there is question for you, you can answer and then you can give. Thanks to be here. It's clear it is a Friday for everybody. It is a typical day people need to go to home to do other things. Many thanks. Now I want to give the floor to Renée Sieber. She is professor of geography of McGill University of Canada, and she will share with us a presentation on public participation, GIS, in the era of artificial intelligence. Renée mixes geography and environment with the use of GIS science tool, and the research of Renée sit in the use and the value of information technology by marginalized community-based organizations, social movement and groups, and also I like the works on indigenous people and the different concept of topology and etc. I think it is very interesting, the reflection, the contribution on the engagement of civil engagement in artificial intelligence, and also the challenge how citizens can manage these tool resources. I want to cite some interesting contributions in paper of Renée. One seminal paper, very common, very used in many courses of GIS science, is about public participation, geographic information systems, a literature review and framework. And then the work of 2015, sieving open data at the crossroad, dominant models and current challenges, and interesting work on data-driven participation, algorithms, cities, citizens, and corporate control. And I think it is very important to make this reflection on how we can be engaged in artificial intelligence. Thanks, Renée, to be here. The floor is yours.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Can you see my slide?
Yes, perfect.
Great. Okay, so hi, everyone. Thank you for putting aside your glass of wine to listen to this talk. I really appreciate it. I'm coming to you from McGill University in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. So bonjour as well, bonsoir. I'm going to talk about public participation GIS in an era of artificial intelligence. I should let you know that in addition to that lovely introduction, I also run a monthly community of practice called AI in Canadian Municipalities, where we talk pretty much data science. And I also do a fair bit of natural language processing, or NLP, myself. I love this image because it shows tessellations. So what is public participation GIS? I put a slash in there because people will talk about public participation GIS, or they will talk about participatory GIS, and there are slightly different flavors that I won't get into at this moment, but it is the use of GIS, Geographic Information Systems, to broaden public involvement in policymaking, as well as the use of GIS to promote the goals of non-governmental organizations, grassroots groups, and community-based organizations. The reason that I mentioned these things is because it gives the government a role in this process. So it really is citizens and the state interacting through the medium of GIS. What is public participation GIS? By the way, these are images that my students have done to involve the public in decisions about the use of space. It is the use of GIS by government, by citizens, but it is also the interrogation. It is the questioning of GIS. It is the question of whether the medium is the appropriate way to engage citizens. Is it the appropriate medium for citizens to counter the state? And really, I am interested in counter mapping, or the use of citizens to try to counter state actions. And that's also what drives me to what is called GeoAI, or location-based artificial intelligence, is the increasing potential use by citizens of artificial intelligence to counter state activities. Now, some of the interesting things about public participation GIS, PPGIS, that I found over the years is citizens often know more about how GIS works than the state does. And I must tell you, when I talk to municipal officials, often there are many people in cities who know far more about artificial intelligence than government employees do. And that's nothing, I'm not saying anything bad about government employees, whether this is the municipal, or other subnational levels, or the federal governments, but often government officials are ill-equipped to talk about these technologies in a knowledgeable way, or to even use them. One of the interesting issues about PPGIS that has implications for artificial intelligence is that PPGIS may or may not scale. Often when we talk about PPGIS, we're talking about community-led, we're talking about municipal or neighborhood-led GIS. And there's a big question about whether it scales to a larger level, particularly because there are trans-jurisdictional issues when you think about AI. And often when we think about PPGIS, we think about the map, the cartographic product, which you're seeing here. But when citizens are using it, when the state is using it to engage with citizens, it is often as much the spatial analysis, the interactions, the interpolations between the points that matter. Here are some examples of, this is a clunky phrase, PPGOAI. Here's an interesting application by the city of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, where they have been looking at interactions between the urban and the rural in terms of wildlife coming into urban areas. And they have many, many camera traps at the urban-rural fringe. trying to capture whether a moose or an elk, or in this case, an ermine, that's in the right-hand ellipse there in red, are coming into the city. And they generated 1 million images through their camera traps. Sorry, 1 million images that pattern recognition said was likely an animal in the image. Not a bicycle, not a car, not a lawnmower, but say a moose in an image coming into an urban space. And they didn't have the human power to do the annotation, to do the labeling. So the AI only took them so far. So they engaged citizens in a citizen science project to do the annotation, and that's ongoing. Here's an example that looks a lot more like counter AI, where AI is being used extensively in municipalities to do what is called predictive policing. Now we know in many countries around the world, policing does not always have a very good record of being fair and just. And when you use classification algorithms, you're training the artificial intelligence on past data, past arrests that themselves have been biased. You may be baking in or embedding the bias going forward, even though you're using a supposedly objective and neutral technology. So there are citizen groups out there who are seeing that AI is leading to false arrests of minorities, of people who are Black and brown, and they are contesting those false arrests. Here's an example in which AI starts to look a little bit different from PPGIS, where it is used sometimes to classify or to synthesize public opinions. So the AI acts as a medium to detect what people are really saying. And this is very useful, especially as you try to scale up these activities. But often what can happen is that you may be inferring public sentiment from your analog to digital transformation, as we heard in the previous talk. Additionally, and we saw this with the concept of volunteered geographic information, or VGI, a great deal of passive, what's called passive harvesting of content. Oh, public, you do not need to attend a meeting, a town hall. We will just infer what you wanted because, let's say, you were standing too long, you got out of the subway, and you were standing outside the subway. We know that there is a bus stop at the subway. So what you want is you want greater intermodal transit efficiencies. So you didn't intend for your footprints to be harvested, but they were, and the city is saying, oh, this is what the citizens want. So it's being used in a lot of cases to change the nature of participation. The use of AI is part of often what is called a nudging strategy. Nudging is a concept that actually won a Nobel Prize and is the use of government actions or private sector actions to convince people to change their opinions. It's often used for consumption purposes, to change people to, for example, make, in highlights here, better, more enlightened, and less impulsive choices, for example, about recycling paper and separating bottles by, is it brown glass or green glass or clear glass? So Nudging is often thought of by government as a good thing because you want a fairer world, but we have seen many, many instances in which this public participation GeoAI and its interactions between the government and the citizens can be used to manipulate the public. And indeed, people in polls, especially in the European Union, the public really likes the idea of artificial intelligence, that maybe it can solve the messiness of participation because it looks more objective. The automation looks more neutral. So participation, you have all of these angry voices, all of these conflicts, and maybe we can once again synthesize and find out what people really want. To find what is called in big data, to find the signal amidst the noise. Unlike PPGIS, the nature, even what we consider the public, can change. And this is from Tarleton Gillespie, who talks about calculated publics, as opposed to public participation GIS, in which you're working with a neighborhood, you're working with cities, the residents of a city, you know who the publics are. But with algorithms can, through their data collection, through the use of recommendation engines, can actually reshape what is said in real time, can customize what is told to people, and then the users reshape their practices to suit the algorithms they depend on. So essentially, the algorithms are recreating the public. So that's something that we should think about. Another difference from public participation GIS to public participation GeoAI is this ability or this blurring of the line between, are we using the technology or should the public be involved in AI governance itself? And there are arguments made back and forth, yes or no, for whether the public should be involved. The World Economic Forum argues that involvement of civil society in the governance of AI is considered crucial by state and non-state actors. Civil society can help ensure AI benefits us all. This is an AI for good argument. It can help steer AI in a positive direction. Conversely, that's an argument to involve the public in AI governance, not just the use of AI. Conversely, public engagement may be seen as slowing down innovation, in part because the public is data or AI illiterate. Public engagement cannot scale. Instead, technical experts are best placed to understand the guardrails. And we see a lot of this in the AI safety arguments that are coming out of the United Kingdom right now. So there is a case to involve the public. There's a case against involving the public. I'm just going to assume, for sake of argument, that we should involve the public. So how does that happen in AI governance? And what are some of its geographic implications? So one of the issues is maybe let's not involve all the public, let's involve stakeholders. And one of the challenges in talking about stakeholder engagement is that could, and we have seen this in AI governance conversations, includes nearly anyone who expresses an interest in AI decision-making. So by having this very broad definition of what a stakeholder is, you can dilute the influence of the people who are actually affected by an algorithm or an AI system. And it can hide the significant resource imbalances. If you're a part of the global partnership on AI, you probably have a lot more influence in AI governance than if you are a migrant coming into southern Italy, an AI system is being used to profile you. It can privilege people with political power, but not necessarily the disempowered. So you've got all of these people who are part of these stakeholders, and it can be kind of a click the box. Oh, we need a migrant, we need a refugee, we need a person from an African country, we need an industrialist. So let's just check the boxes. And lastly, we need to think about the question of who gets to decide who is a stakeholder and who is not. If we go the public route, we might think of participation as capacity building. Here is Finland. It's an initiative to create AI literacy for the entire public, and that's been rolled out in other Scandinavian countries. Another way that participation could be implemented is through what are called low-code and no-code platforms to teach stakeholders to code via generative AI, where instead of writing code yourself or teaching people to code from scratch, what you do instead is you teach them how to do what is called prompt engineering to refine the question sufficiently in ChatGPT, that is GPT, Generative Pre-trained Transformers, GPT 3.5 or 3 or 4, or for example, Microsoft's Copilot or Llama 2. So there are a lot of platforms right now that can allow you to different publics to do low code versus no code. A lot of people talk about participatory design involving the public in the design of AI systems. That it does assume that AI is for good, and you're tweaking the system to make sure that it is fairer and is customized to different public's needs. Another example is what's called AI for good, and this is largely doing AI on behalf of publics. We actually see this a lot in municipal governments, where the city employees say, well, what our residents want is improved services, is better service delivery, better user interfaces, better user experiences. So if they get that, then they will be satisfied, then they will feel included, then we will be doing AI for good. You may see examples in which people talk about, oh, let's include people in collaborating on AI government, working as equal partners. So that you can see that in many different flavors, whether that is a true partner, a partial partner, actually countering the state, for example, about autonomous weapons, being involved in the use of AI to determine social benefits, or maybe even I have my citizen developed AI, you have your own AI, and we're going to duel it out in the courts or in the court of public opinion. And there are reasons why we might want to look at citizens having greater control over AI governance and the use of AI themselves. There are a host of reasons why you may want to, as a citizen, involve yourself in AI policy and governance. I've just given you a few here. I won't go through them, but there is some sentiment that AI-assisted participation may not be for good, but maybe for bad, for example, through the use of facial recognition technology to classify participants. And there are interesting geographic implications for this when you can actually see where the hot spots of angry sentiment are versus the cool spots in a protest. So the public may very well want to be involved in countering the state's use of AI. And here's yet another example of counter AI through the Algorithmic Justice League. So there actually are instances in which citizen groups have emerged to counter algorithmic use. Here's yet another example in which a citizen in Washington state in the US actually used facial recognition tools against the police to identify the police. Lastly, I think it's always useful to talk about whether AI is for good and will benefit a participatory democracy, or whether it will impede participatory democracies. One of the largest challenges we have going forward is that AI is transjurisdictional. It does not respect political boundaries. It is all over the place. So how does a city, how does a state, how does a federal government respond when you have technologies that are based on data collected from everywhere and can be applied anywhere? And then the question is, can the public even, forget the state, can the public even leverage GeoAI, have a voice in policy discussions against this AI is everywhere? So I'll leave you there. Thank you.
Thanks, Renee, for your contribution. We received a couple of questions for Ayona. If Ayona can give a couple of minutes to answer, and then we leave her, and we move to the third presentation, and at the end we make the discussion. A couple of questions. The first is about how smart city produce and engage power. And the second is, can you share just, it's not a new lesson, but just a short relation between utopian thinking and smart city? What we are assisting, a repetition of top-down approaches, coloniality, etc. The floor is yours, Ayona.
Thank you. Those are two very good questions. I just didn't get the one part of the first question. How do smart cities something about power?
Produce engaged power.
Produce engaged power. Okay. Right. So those two are related. So some of the work that I did before with smart cities, it shows particular ways that the smart city is conceived. And so the way I'm referring to smart cities here today is basically as a state initiative and a state policy. Now, of course, that's very different from when you look at it bottom up, because when I talk to communities, they say, we are also smart, we also do smart cities. So if you think about it in terms of smart cities as a top-down policy initiative, I mean, first of all, of course, it's about power. A lot of it is about power. In the Indian context, it's also been about power across different scales. So the federal state trying to centralize power and make sure that everything is done from that scale, whereas the urban government trying to say, well, no, we are decentralized, we will take our own decisions. So state power itself, I think there's a tension there. In terms of the smart city itself, as it's rolled out in actual existing conditions, often the smart city produces or reproduces existing inequalities and therefore reinforces power of existing communities, because to install a smart technology, you need to have an infrastructure already in place. So in some of the cities that I looked at before, when the city government decides that we want to install a smart waste system or a smart water system, that can only be installed if a water infrastructure exists or a waste infrastructure exists. And that often leaves out communities that are not connected to the grid, for example. And so you often see that the benefits of the smart technologies or benefits of the smart city initiatives are often concentrated in more wealthier neighborhoods, in more middle-class neighborhoods, people who already have access to power. And that also increases their power in that sense. And then the final comment, I think it also reinforces social power. And in some cases, like, for example, the smart waste system in one of the cities we looked at, put chips, microchips, on the sanitation workers. And so it was the sanitation workers that were being surveilled. So if they don't turn up for work and clean the street, there is a signal that goes to the city authorities saying this worker has not cleaned up. And those workers were, of course, in the minority community. So that sort of reinforced power or inequalities. So that's what I would say very quickly on that. Was there anything else? There was a second question as well.
The relation between the utopian thinking and the smart city in terms of a repetition of some model, top-down, coloniality, etc.
Right, sorry. Yeah, so it kind of answers my first point, kind of answers the second point. So the utopian thinking, as I had said also in my presentation, is about this automated, seamless future, that everything can be solved by smart technologies. And utopias can be very good. So in that sense, one of the things about this utopian thinking is that it kind of initiated a lot of investment, a lot of thinking about how we want our cities to look like in the future. But it also fell into a trap that can be achievable. And actually, it was utopian in the sense that it's very difficult to achieve ubiquitously, universally. So in pockets of the city, the utopian idea that you turn on your smartphone and you can actually monitor how the city is being governed is possible. So these command and control centers that could govern how the traffic is flowing and initiated automated fines and penalties was possible, but it's only possible where the CCTV cameras exist and they're looped into the command and control centers. So it's a very fragmented, patchy approach. And the utopian thinking about this being completely ubiquitous and seamless and removing all sorts of discretion and corruption is absolutely utopian. It's a fantasy. So some of the stuff that I've been writing about before is there's utopian thinking is also part of myth making about what a future is, and myth making about a past that was kind of an imaginary blissful past, and the present is disrupted and the present is corrupt and awful, and the future therefore can be a reflection of the past only if we use technology. So there is about a lot of myth making as well that occurs with these smart technologies. And I don't want to take any more time, but I'm happy to come back on any of these later on.
Many thanks. And I see you next time, we hope. And I let the floor now to Salvatore Romano. He is the head of research at AI Forensic. AI Forensic is a European non-profit organization dedicated to enhancing the privacy and digital right. Salvatore is doing a PhD in the Internet and Disciplinary Institute of Barcelona, and he tried to merge social psychology with the computational sciences. He's specialized in media studies, platform accountability, and etc. So we are very proud to have Salvatore here and to focus on the geography of algorithm, especially in the boundaries between digital sovereignty and the use of social media in geopolitical conflicts. Thank you, Salvatore. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you see my slides?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for the invitation and for organizing this amazing conference. So my focus will be slightly different. I'm, as you said, part of AI Forensics, a non-profit organization. And what we do is basically we investigate influential and opaque algorithms and try to assess their social impact. So today I want to briefly introduce you to the reason why we do algorithmic audit. And I want to make a couple of examples about how geolocation and geoblocking can affect basically our interaction with social media. I will make the case of Russia and the war in Ukraine, and then I will present the TikTok Global Observatory, which is a tool that we develop and make available to the public. So we do algorithmic audits because algorithms are the gatekeeper of the internet, and often they are opaque and accountable. And basically they are not optimized for the interest of the users. They are rather optimized for the interest of the platform and in general profit. So these platforms operate under trademark, so their algorithms are somehow not public. And this opacity can hide biases. So inside this black box, as we usually call them, there are hidden some biases that can have like impact on society. And what we do is basically push for an open scrutiny of these algorithms. Thankfully to European Europe, we have a couple of very important regulations, the GDPR and the Digital Service Act, that somehow give users and citizens the right to understand what type of data is collected and processed while they are on these very large online platforms. And platforms are also somehow now pushed to disclose some parts of their functioning of their algorithm. And starting from 2018 and now with the new regulation, transparency is increasing, but let's say that we are not where we would like to be yet. The first example I want to talk about is a research we did after Russia decided to invade Ukraine, and we use this as a use case to understand something that is quite common on social media, which is basically the division of content across country following national moderation policies. I start from the fact that social media are not global. So this is a map of where Facebook was blocked in 2022 and the countries where it has been blocked in the past. This is basically the opposite graph for YouTube. So these are the countries where YouTube is accessible and it has a local version. So the green countries, while you can see that there are some countries like China and others where YouTube is currently blocked. So we know that even like the social media that are largely adopted all around the world, they are not accessible from all the countries, but just from a few of them. This is a photo from a protest against all the Chinese apps available in India. India recently removed TikTok together with other 30 plus apps. And that's basically one of the examples where also TikTok faced criticism from national countries. What the literature in this case says that when there is the construction of a digital wall dividing the users of two countries, we can call this phenomenon as the splinternet. There are also other ways to call it. Someone use information sovereignty. Some others use like balkanization of the internet as a concept to describe how the internet can be divided in small subportion. What we gonna try to understand today is how the splinternet affects also social media inside the diffusion of content. So after the war started, we wonder if splinternet was coming to Russia as well, because Russia is a quite interesting case for splinternet analysis, since before the war, all these platforms were available for Russian users. So Russian users can access Yandex and WeContact, that are the Russian platforms. They could access ByteDance, which is the owner of TikTok. And they could also access Google, Meta, and Twitter as the US platform. Right after the invasion of Ukraine, Google, Meta, and Twitter were basically banned from the country. And we were asking ourselves what was the destiny of TikTok. So we decided to run a study, also to double check what basically TikTok declared after the invasion, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Basically, they said that they will stop all the new live stream and new content upload in Russia. So they basically decide to freeze the platform, not allowing anyone to post new content. What we found out instead is that they implemented quite important geo-blocking to all the Russian users. So in this picture, you can see one of the most famous profile on TikTok, Charlie D'Amelio. The same profile is accessed the same day at the same time from two different phones. One is using a Russian IP, so an IP located in Russia, and the other phone is using an IP in France, but basically is the same all around the world except from Russia. So what we can see is that the Charlie D'Amelio profile, as seen from Russia, gives no content. No, so the platform tells us that this very famous and active profile has published no content yet, which is obviously not true. What is happening is that Russian users have been limited in their accessibility to the content that is not produced in Russia. So I will show some other example. This is the profile of Macron. If we access it from France, we clearly see the list of video. If you access the same profile from Russia, instead, we see that there is no content available. This led even to interesting results, like this screenshot that we can see right now. This is the official page of TikTok accessed from Russia, and even this page, the official TikTok page, is banned in Russia. And that was a clear example of how this type of geo-blocking, so deciding if to show a content based on the IP location of where this content was posted, can have unwanted consequences also for the platform itself. It's important to say that when the war in Ukraine started, this digital digital world construction happened on both sides. So if Russian users were not allowed to access all the content posted outside of Russia, which is, as we say, basically 95% of the content or more, also the European Union decided to limit the accessibility of some channels related to Russia, in this case, Russia Today, and other state-owned media. So we can see that in Russia, the Russian Today account is available, while in France, Russian Today is not available. So that's a very clear example of how geopolitical conflict can generate also world construction in the digital world, and specifically for social media, this is implemented through the usage of the location of the IP of the users. So now I just want to introduce you to the TikTok Global Observatory, which is a platform that we developed that is together with the Amsterdam University, that is now live and you can access it. So the URL of the platform is tkgo TikTok Global Observatory.aiforensic.org if you want to check it. And basically in this map of the world, what we did is to collect the recommended videos in every of the 197 countries where we can access TikTok, and basically compare them across countries. What we want to test basically is a presence of split internet at scale. No, so we don't want to wait for a war to start to make a data collection about a specific country. We want to have all the country collected at the same time. And there are at least two possible way of seeing the split internet inside the platform. The first one is at the content moderation level, and the second one is on the content promotion level. So content moderation is basically when we access, for example, a search result, we make a query on the platform. These are four type of answer that the platform can give us. The platform can give us some available content, or it can say that the content is banned because it violates the guidelines, because it violates the hateful behavior guidelines, or just can like somehow do some gaslighting, telling us that the word that we are looking for is not correctly spelled. In this very messy graph, we can see a list of queries made across different countries on the left, so Argentina, Germany, Israel, and so on. And for each of these queries, we can see the result and the type of moderation that is applied by the platform. As you can see from the picture, there is not a clear pattern. So every country basically is moderating differently the same keywords. Some example are, for example, that in Poland, fag is not banned, but for example, the word queer is banned. Instead, other country from Middle East, they are banning for hateful behavior the word lesbian, gay, or gay guy. So we can see that moderation is not applied consistently across all the countries. Instead, content moderation is basically nation-based. And always on this track, we try to see if there are some differences across countries, also in the way content is recommended. So if content moderation is the accessibility of a content promotion is basically if the content is recommended by the algorithm. And we basically invented this idea of platform mediated proximities, meaning that even if two countries are far in space, they can be brought together thanks to an algorithm that basically suggests the same content to two countries that are geographically distant. So this is the final graph that we created. This is a network graph. Each of the nodes represent one of the country that we investigated, and they are as close one to the other as many video they share. So let's say that to make an example, to compare Italy and Spain, we access TikTok from Italy and from Spain many times per day for some weeks, and then we compare the amount of video that are recommended to the Italian accounts and to the Spanish accounts. The more content they share, the closer those countries will be in this graph. I'm sure it will be clear in 1 second. So let's try to make some example. Here on the left, we have Russia. As you can see, Russia is clearly not clustered together with all the other countries. Instead, Russia is quite far from the rest of the country. This is because Russia implemented a hard ban on certain content, as we saw in the previous investigation. So the number of content that are recommended to Russian users and are also recommended to other users outside Russia is very limited. And Russia is somehow an edge case. The second country that we see that we see here is Senegal. Senegal is an outlier, similarly to Russia, because in the period of the data collection, the government basically put a ban on TikTok and heavily limited the amount of content that users can access. Also, USA is an outlier, and we're gonna find out in a second why. To understand a little bit more how this geography of the recommendation is shaping this digital world, we decided to color each node according to the continent that the country is from. And for continent, I mean the geographical continent. So we can see we have Africa, Asia, Europe, North and South America, and Oceania. You can already see that basically color are somehow clustered together, but there are some interesting edge cases. So we can see that most of the African countries are clustered together. So there is some geographical closeness that is similar to the algorithmic proximity that connects all these countries, while instead Europe is spread into one part is somehow outside the main cluster, and some other countries are inside instead the main cluster. The difference between these two parts of Europe is basically their regulation. So the countries on the top right, they have GDPR, DSA, and European Union regulation, while the other countries are close to Europe and they're geographically inside Europe, but they have different regulations. So those countries are geographically close between each other, but they are far because they have a different regulation. There are some other outliers that you might have noticed, because inside this European cluster, there are also some overseas departments, no? So some region of France like Martinique, La Réunion, and so on, that are geographically very far from France and the other countries under GDPR and so on, but they share basically the same recommendation, proving that algorithmic proximity is actually shaping this ecosystem. As I was saying before, US is a specific case because, as we proved with our analysis, is not US is not limited, is not somehow moderated differently from other countries. The problem for USA is that they are producing way more content than the others, and so this basically put them somehow aside from the main cluster. And you can see here that as for European Union, we also have some US territories that are in other continents, but they are very close to US in terms of recommendation they receive. Yeah, so we built also a score to assess this proximity, algorithmic proximity, and we basically calculated for all the countries. The closest country are Lithuania and Czech Republic, but beside like this fun fact, the proximity index is able to tell us if some country is implementing some moderation policies that are not public and that are basically differentiating this country from all the others. And these metrics allow us to detect it immediately and basically in an automated fashion, so that we can immediately start a deeper investigation on the country to understand what type of moderation policies are changing. And that's it for me.
Okay, thanks for your presentation. It's very interesting, this geographical representation of proximity of the way in which we manage the how EP shape our media. Okay, we have a couple of questions for the speakers. One is about for René Sieber. What are the space for civil society and democracy in a data-driven society against the concentration of power of corporation and states? You did some example, for example, but what you see more as more efficacy in consolidating democracy against the concentration of power?
I think it's always important to look at what's new and what's durable, what's new and what's long-standing. AI does not disrupt long-standing challenges in ensuring broad participation from the public. So then the question becomes, what is new about artificial intelligence that is different from the rise of multinational corporations and their influence on governments, which has existed prior to artificial intelligence? And by the way, one of the things about AI also is that it's algorithms plus data. And I think one of the problems we often have is we focus too much on data and not on the algorithms, or at minimum, the feature engineering that must be done to data to input it into these systems. So I don't know. It's a very, very difficult question to answer. I would like to think that with the increased user interfaces on top of software libraries, when you can go to R or to Python libraries and get facial recognition technology, when you can get random forests, when you can get decision trees, when you can get these AI algorithms and use them yourself, I think there's still great potential. We haven't made a lot of distinctions between generative AI and AI. And one of the big differences between generative AI and AI is the massive dependence on harvesting of content. So even if you can use these technologies to counter the state, you're building them on top of an algorithmic assemblage, an algorithm stack, in which it's very difficult to change the ever deeply embedded biases in the system. So I think it's going to be challenging. I think it is more challenging now than ever before. I think one of the things that nonprofits are doing these days is just really valuable. I don't believe in transparency as an end in itself. It's always a means to an end. But at minimum, we live in a social media environment in which the lack of transparency, putting aside the natural opacity of these algorithms, there is so much more transparency about what is being done to us or supposedly on our behalf. And I think that part of that is to not accept that AI is for good naturally, or that's merely a dual use technology. And sometimes it can be used for good, or sometimes it can be used for evil, but it's neutral. AI is never neutral. The data is never neutral. The algorithms are never neutral. We make decisions about how we, as was said before, promote them and moderate them. And we can continue to look at that. That's not exactly an answer to the question, but as best as I can come up with.
Yes, thanks. Are not easy question. This is a big challenge for everybody. Now a question for Salvatore. It is about how we can counter, oppose, change this top-down control of EP, shaping the contents and media, etc. I think it's very useful, the work of your organization in sharing this vision. What you say, how possible strategies to open and give more transparency to control more this situation.
So thank you for the question. What we do is trying to make platform accountable. So like our work is in the first place like something that goes in the direction, no, of the question. Because if you are not aware that is because of your IP location that you cannot access some content, then you cannot react. So the first step is studying and analyzing the platform, building open source technology to enable as many people as possible to do algorithmic audit and try to give them the instrument to understand what's going on. That's the first step. Then when you understand that your IP location is basically your digital citizenship on TikTok, then you should find all the possible ways to pollute or change the data and manipulate the data that you give to the platform. So the platform assume that the data that you're giving to them are correct because most of the people simply are not aware of the data collection made by the platform. But once we are aware, we can definitely like use this knowledge to fight back. So VPNs, residential IPs, network of IPs given by other citizens around the world, all these are tactics that we can use. Then, I'm sorry to say, but probably the final option is not using proprietary platform and social media and possibly try to build an alternative. So there are alternative social media that are not based on the extraction of personal data. There are other software that are not based on this business model. I think these other platforms should be encouraged. And so we should not stop fighting back big techs. At the same time, we should build the alternative and try to live the alternative. No, so I suggest you to take a look at the Fediverse, at Mastodon, and all the and possibly even to invent a new way of communication that can be better thought from the beginning.
Thanks, Salvatore. Now there is a question for the two speakers. It is about, in case of a participatory artificial intelligence, how we can grant security for the data collected in collaborative work, for example, from traditional community, citizens, etc., because normally who develop this process are company, government, and etc. So the question is how to improve social control of this data.
Don't put it online. Don't make it digital. That is the easiest answer to it. When we talked about public participation in the 90s, we were encountering indigenous groups that refused to put their data online, even if it would have helped their case to have their data online. Mm-hmm. We see, for example, the Maori licensing their language. So these generative AI platforms have to reach out to the indigenous group before getting any data. And lastly, there are interesting implications for digital sovereignty. So I think we need to question whether or not data shouldn't be geofenced. So in Canada, we have quite a discussion about the Indigenous bands not sharing their data, not putting it online, but rather instead of looking at it as here's our data harvest at will, but this is a government-to-government data sharing arrangement. For those of you who can think back to the mid-1990s, where when we were talking about interoperability of municipal governments data sharing, we were talking about these memos of understanding. And if the memos of understanding are quid pro quo, as in I'll give you my data only if you share your data with me, then that becomes more siloed. It's the government's use of the data, but not the private sector's harvesting of the data. So there are some benefits for digital sovereignty out there.
Thanks. I think this is important to enforce regulation, granting human rights first of all, then interest of data business. And Salvatore, do you want to add something about this challenge?
I just want to say that it might be a little bit naive, but I still believe in license. So when you publish some data online, try to understand what type of license are you using. Let's try to invent new type of licenses that allow us to not be exploited by big companies trying to find data for large language model, which is like worldwide sport right now. So it's more and more difficult to keep our data safe from the exploitation of big platforms. So if you are not able to forbid the access to your data to crawlers that are willing to create the next ChatGPT or whatever, I agree that it's better to not put them online and try to share them on other like channels that are more protected. Let's say I totally agree with that, but we should really read the terms of service and and basically the agreement we accept when we decide to share our personal data, because most of them are made to be harmful. So yeah, it's difficult to defend ourselves, but we should really try.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for your contribution. Thanks to Salvatore Romano for the presentation. Thanks to René Sieber. And now we are arrived to the end of this event. Thanks to all the participants, and we meet again for people interested in the next online laboratory at 9 o'clock online. Thanks, René, again, and thanks, Salvatore. See you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Ciao.
Ciao.